Good morning, everybody. How are you? Monday the 19th of October. We've skipped the halfway point. And how scary. We're through the month now. Soon on the other side. Hope you had a good weekend. Just trying to get my mouse to do what it's supposed to do. How are you? Morning Sue, morning Anne, morning Sarah, morning Anne. I can't see how many of you were joining today because, as usual, Facebook is not my friend, and it's stopping me from seeing a lot of things because it can't see my own live video. So there you go. Colours that we're going to need today are Payne's Grey, probably ultramarine, probably cadmium yellow, and either cadmium red or burnt sienna. I don't mind whichever one, but as you know, I'll be working quickly because it's a demo today. And but I'll wait a few minutes. We had a lovely masterclass on Saturday. It was a full day class. I'll show you. It's watercolours. I'll show you what we did. This was the subject matter. A nice big A3 beech tree in watercolour with strong shadows in the autumn. Really lovely to do. A nice mellow chilled 4-hour, 4.5 hour class. Really nice to do. So it was a beautiful day on Saturday. So there's a lot of wet in wet, you might have guessed today. But it's fine. It's all good. Thank you, Anne. So what's nice about the Saturday masterclasses are that if you can't make it and you like it, you can either, it's 25 quid if you want, if you've got the supplies and you just want to watch the lesson and do the lesson yourself, or it's 55 and we'll send the materials to you, so you don't need anything other than what we send you. We only used 4 colours, I think, for that. We used cadmium red, cadmium yellow, burnt sienna, and phthalo blue for that one. Right. I don't think. Do I jump onto? I'll jump onto Discord, but I don't think anybody will be there then if Chris isn't on it yet. But I'll connect my ear just in case. Oh, we've got Robert on there. Morning, Robert. I don't know if you can hear me. Oh, you can hear me today. Oh, that's good. I've just looked at this one figure and I think the head's a bit weird because she's got a hood on. Let's skim that out a little bit. So it'll be lots of wet in wet stuff to do today. So yeah, I'll go through the colours again. I have sort of sketched out the tree, but not too heavily. So it's Payne's Grey, a bit of cadmium yellow, either cadmium red or burnt sienna. One will go more brown, one will go more purple. It depends which way you want to go. And maybe ultramarine, but it depends how blue your Payne's Grey is, because obviously Payne's Grey is traditionally made from Mars black and ultramarine. So some makes are extremely blue, others are more grey and what have you. So it does depend very much on your make or brand. Yeah, the Winsor & Newton Cotman is a really good one. It's a proper Payne's grey, whereas their artist's quality went almost indigo. It was practically blue. It's bizarre how one company with two different brands can make them so differently. So it's a nice Payne's grey, that one. It's one of my favourite Payne's greys, the Cotman one. But the White Knight one's quite nice as well. Right, so I'm going to wet my whole page. Oh, I've still got a dirty brush. Look at that. At least you can see where I'm wetting it. That's from... when was that? I didn't use... Oh, did I use this brush on Saturday? I was panicking then. I want it really wet. You can just about make it out now. I've got that bit of colour on there. Did it on purpose, of course, just so you could tell where I was painting. And then I'm going to go Payne's grey at the top. Oh, I know. It was dirty from Thursday afternoon's class as well. No, I've done lots of classes since then. I think it's just that I didn't clean my brush properly. Just making excuses up for myself. Right, so I'm sort of covering it quite loose and free to start with. I want it to feel misty, but I also want a bit of a glow. There. So I'm just lifting it out, even though it's still wet. I'm just lifting it out. Do you know, I think I will go with a bit of burnt sienna rather than cadmium red. And I'm just going to drop that in. Maybe I should mix some burnt sienna with cadmium red. Burnt sienna with Payne's grey. That's a bit too ginge for me. Going right over where the people are. Really let it mist up and fade and do whatever it's got to do. Same for the pathway, because everything's very desaturated in the mist. The colours are there, so it's almost monochromatic, but not quite. And that has to go round the edge, so we're just very lightly and wetting wet. Bit of cadmium yellow. Now, this is where you could use ultramarine, or you could just mix it with Payne's grey. It will go, Payne's grey and cadmium yellow will go a sort of green, but you might want just a little bit of ultramarine to make it a fraction more green. And again, this is all wet in wet. Certainly wouldn't get the birds singing this much in this weather. Might get the odd crow. How very murky. I will slightly, as it's drying, I'm just going to darken the path in the front with burnt sienna and ultramarine again. But Unless it's a proper pea super, you're really never in the mist, are you? Because it's always just over there. So, just darkening some areas. I'll do the same with the green. If I will use a bit more ultramarine in that. Right, in the immediate foreground, just because although it's misty, you still want to get the idea of depth in a scene. Now we haven't got background, midground, foreground as such, because it's all merged into one. You can't see the background. So if we just slightly darken up the foreground, not quite to where the figures are, so just a little bit below that. That should help. Might be a bit of greenery in that at the back there. It should make a big difference. So I just need that to dry. We're going to put a fence post and stuff in, but it's all going to be about using watercolours as it's meant to be, sort of nice and soft and light, transparent colours. Now there's always a big debate. There was a debate in one of the watercolour groups, a group that I've now left because it was getting a bit problematic in the group, where somebody was asking about the difference between opaque watercolours and transparent watercolours, and somebody wrongly said, with such expert opinion as you often get, if you're using opaque watercolours, you're not using watercolours properly. Watercolours are opaque. So I had to go in and say, well, actually you do get opaque and transparent watercolours. It just depends on the brand and the pigment. So you do get opaque watercolours. However, you can make a watercolour that is opaque. You can make it transparent just by adding a lot more water, but you do lose the saturation of colour a little bit more. But it depends what you want to paint, really. I don't really use a lot of transparent colours, because I use artist quality. The cadmium, the lemon, the cadmium red, the cadmium yellow. They're all opaque, or fairly opaque. But I can make them transparent if I want. If I painted a lot of flowers and things, I'd probably go more transparent. I might get the hairdryer on this in a bit, but there's no mad rush. See, as it dries, there are two things that could happen. I could sort of put in some slightly darker bits, but I may get coniflowers, and I don't want coniflowers in this picture. So sometimes I am going to get the hairdryer out. Sometimes it's best just to let it dry or force it to dry. So you can actually hardly see these colours. You can tell it's not white because it's nowhere near the colour of white paper. Look. But because I've softened and merged and wetted, it's all much softer. So it's then working out how to plan the rest of the picture around it, because you don't want anything too hard. I think the most depth in the scene is sort of the tree, and there's actually 3 figures here that you can just make out the 2, but there's a person in front of them, so that's why it looks a little bit bumpy. So I'm going to do the guy in the background first. Now, I don't know if, because I had camera 2 set up slightly differently on Saturday, it might be upside down. It is upside down. I don't think I can turn the camera up. There we go. Let's zoom in on the drawing that you can hardly see, because he's in the mist, so he's going to be further away, isn't he? Right, so I'm going to go in with Payne's Grey, just Payne's Grey, and oodles and oodles of water. And I'm going to paint his ghostly form. This is like the really small number 1 round, because I don't trust myself with anything bigger for this. Now, I could add a bit of brown in this if I wanted to punch it up a little. But he's sort of behind. But we also know that watercolours are going to dry 30% lighter, so we don't have to worry too much. So basically, he's going to be the softest. And if I do make a mess and he turns out not as soft as I wanted, I can always put a bit of chalk on. Because this person here with the hood, she needs to be a little bit stronger. And in fact, the man that I say man, it's funny how I've assigned genders to all these people. I've no idea. He needs to be a little bit darker, but then there is another figure in front of him. He's sort of like that. Letting him dry a fraction. I might make him a little bit darker, or I will have to make him a little bit darker, because we want that feeling of depth and mist, even though they're probably only 4 or 5 feet apart, him to this person, I do want it to feel like they're walking into the mist. And the only way you can do it all in such a way is that, you know, our figure, it's less than, it's about a hand width, all of our figures, but to make it feel like they're going into the mist, each layer of person has to be darker than the previous layer. And obviously it will feel a little bit weird until the rest of the surroundings are on. But it's a real, I think I did this as a Thursday morning class years ago, 3 years ago, and everybody did such a lovely job. And I was looking for a slightly different image today, but I couldn't find one that was in my head. I very rarely can find what's in my head manifested until I make it myself, but there you are. Right, now that's got to dry. I did draw, you can't tell, I did actually draw a fence post, which has got to be about there, but I'm going to leave that for a sec. Maybe I'll just quickly get the hairdryer on the final figure I've just done. Just so I can get the other two figures in, which are going to be much darker, but still not totally full on Payne's grey. But obviously they're going to look much darker. Compared to the others. This is all still with the number 1 brush. They are a bit big, so technically I should be using a slightly smaller brush, but a slightly larger brush, but I think it's easier to use a smaller one. You've just got that little bit more control. Morning. It's all right. Oh, that's good. A nice murky scene. See, what at this point I don't want to try and make it less misty, and the more details we start to put in, the less misty it's going to be. Alright, so everyone has big coats on in the winter, so it's really hard to check how proportionate they are. So let me zoom out. Hello.
Hello. Oh, you got that. Good.
I got that, but then there's that. That's the box for Louise. It's in the shop messages. I'll tell you in a minute.
What message, John?
It's not a message.
Oh, that'll be one of its.
It was a comment. Right, so that's going to dry. Now you can see now that the guy that looked really dark is now really soft because of various tones. I don't want to put any shadows in it or anything because it is going to make it too much of a in your face kind of misty scene. So I'm just going to use a rigger brush with Payne's Grey and Burnt Sienna with Abandoned Cadmium Red, I think. And then I want lots of water because I just want to put some misty trees on that side. So whatever I'm doing, I'm sort of trying to fade down the bottoms so it feels a bit more of a misty scene. But because it's sort of late autumn, we can get away with not too many leaves. Well, no leaves, no billions of branches either. But I still want some branches. But obviously the main tree is going to come there, so I want some of these to come on the opposite side. And maybe a few from this bit. We want to feel like they're got to create that sort of pathway. So it's very watery. So for those of you that do struggle with watercolour and getting the right amount of water in, this is a really good method and exercise for you, because you've really got to get the water in for this to work. Maybe a hint of a fence. And if I put a little bit of ground underneath that fence and then wash it with water, that then becomes quite merged into into the background. It's all about softness. It's the same as if I do a little bit more to the foreground path, which is sort of here. I'll sort of outline the edge and drag it in, but again I'm still using large amounts of water on the brush to allow for that misty feel. I don't want to put too much detail in, because as I say, we lose that effect of a misty morning or afternoon. This is almost like a Boxing Day stroll or something, isn't it? Right, so I'm going to do a slightly darker Payne's Grey and Ultramarine. Now my internet at home is way better than my internet here in the middle of town. It's ridiculous. That's alright. Because you'd expect the largest town in North Oxfordshire to have a decent internet system. But whenever I complain, they always say, oh, well, remember that the wires are 90 years old. And I think, well, for the amount I'm paying you, you can make them newer. I'm going to bring that tree down a little bit more. And it is quite dark and sludgy over this side. So actually it doesn't matter if I get cauliflowers in this end for the grass and what have you, because of keeping it feeling a little bit misty anyway. I will do a little bit more to that tree. Lighten it. Yeah, that's all right. Well, I don't know what I'm going to do to them. I might just do a little bit of dry brush grass right in the foreground. But my foreground in real life is really, really soft and nondescript. It's hard to tell anything on there. So you might be seeing a little bit more colour than there is. Need to make that. Yeah, oh, from the photograph, it is, and I don't know if I want to go as dark as that in the foreground. Yeah, well, I mean, you know, there's a bit of grass in it, so it works, but I prefer it just to have a bit more colour in. Yeah, definitely. Let's go a little bit thicker with that branch. My landline rings at 10 o'clock every night. It rings not fully. It just pings a couple of times and then stops. And then at 10:30 it might do a full-on ring, and it's been doing that nearly every night for 4 years. Yeah, I don't know whether, because I've got an old rotary dial phone thing, so whether it's just an issue with that or there might be a slight, I don't know. I have no idea. It's just really weird how it same time every evening. No, nothing there. That's what it almost feels like. It feels like somebody's trying to contact me at 10 o'clock every night. I'll have to see if I can do that. It's just such a weird thing, because sometimes it's not even a full ring. It's just a ting and then nothing. Yes. Yeah, I don't. Well, I'm not there during the day, but even throughout the whole of lockdown, because I don't use my landline, only really my mom was the only person with it. I don't even know what my landline number is, because I don't. I might use it to ring Sky, but that's about it. Because everything else I use my mobile for. I only have the landline just so I can have the internet. But because we have a lot of power cuts where I am, I have the old rotary phone because it doesn't go out when there's a power cut, like all the electric phones do. So it's just quite handy to have. Right, then I'm going to put the fence post in. Where is that fence? It's sort of about there. But again, loads of water to soften the base, just so it feels a little bit more watery. I'll just switch. I've done all of that with the rigger. I should have been using the round brush. Probably a lot easier. Now I might use some of this right for the path at the very front, but dry brush it in, because at the moment you see the midground is the heaviest. Those figures that we painted in right at the start of it, so you want to sort of create that feeling of depth, just a little. I might cover him in a little bit of brown because he's sort of a bit too grey. Right, so I'm going to do a bit more green, maybe a bit more dirty green right at the front. But it's all about pushing things back and bringing things forward when you're doing misty scenes like this, because you still want it to feel misty, which is really tricky to create. Because foregrounds are very rarely misty, but there's, again, they're desaturated and there's not a huge amount of information in a foreground when it's sort of like this, other than it's bits of stone or bracken or something like that. Just sort of bring a bit of dry brush around, a bit of brown in there as well. I might even go with a little bit more burnt sienna. Now the reason for a bit more burnt sienna in the path is just to warm up the foreground, because of it being a bit more orange. You know, I'm not a massive fan of warm and cool colours, that kind of thing, but if you can do a bit more orangey browns in the foreground, it brings it forward and pushes the other colours back. So I might do a little bit of sort of burnt sienna-y twiggy things just in the foreground area, the bottom inch or so. Just dance them in with the rigger. I'll use some of that, just a bit of green. Misty scenes are quite nice because you can work on them quite quickly, but it's just sort of like, it's always catching them at exactly the right point of keeping it misty without too much information going on. See, I don't know if my figures are too dark in the foreground. If you sort of look at a scene and you relax your view, and whatever is the strongest will stand out. Now to me, these people stand out far more, and you've got two options in a scene like this where you've got, the figures are my focal point, they are my focal point, so I do want them to stand out. However, I can balance up the foreground a little bit and make it a bit darker, and that may well bring my eyes back and forth, so we can play around with the three, because there's no shadow because of it being desaturated and a low light. Or The other option I can do is actually put a bit of soft pastel over those figures, which I might well have to resort to do. I just want to double check before I commit to doing that, because as I say, there's not a huge amount. I'm practically finished, but it's just that balance of not knowing whether I need to go in. Let me just quick blast with the hairdryer just so I can see the softer tones. Now I do think I need to just soften them a little bit. Let's see. A little bit of chalk on my finger. But I don't want to make them paler than the figures behind, but this should push them back. Yes, that's worked. See, if I do really push down hard to soften the tone. If at any point it looked like it was going to be too strong, I can always dab it off with a putty eraser. But for me, that has softened that grey enough to push them into the mist a little bit more. And then the guy that's around the corner of the lane, he's even further into the mist, so that kind of works. But I just thought it was nice just to play around with a muted palette this week and see how you get on. Next Monday is a macaw parrot in watercolour, so that'll be quite nice. Loads of colours with that, lots of phthalos and cadmium reds and lemon yellows and cadmium yellows. Wet in wet, bit of biro lid work I reckon for next Monday. Tonight is the vintage couple lifting out with Payne's Grey. Tomorrow afternoon is acrylics, and it's a white wooden bridge with lake reflections. Hopefully I can find that photograph. Wednesday afternoon is light through a window in pencil. Thursday morning is getting distance in a landscape using zones of colour. We've done that before on a Monday using aerial perspective. Thursday afternoon is the Kingsmen Stone Circle in watercolour. There is nothing on Thursday evening, and there is nothing on Friday morning. Friday afternoon is the watercolour portrait, which is really nice to do. Nothing on Saturday, nothing on Sunday, so then that will take us back to Monday morning, which is your macaw parrot in watercolour. So thanks ever so much for joining me today. It's a nice little simple one that you can really get your teeth into. If you didn't want to make it more autumnal, you could use more blues, like Prussian blue maybe, or even phthalo blue and Payne's Grey, or phthalo blue and cadmium red, and make more of a snow scene rather than an autumn scene. So you could almost do this through the seasons to see how the mist varies and changes. But I'm glad I put that little bit of pastel on, because I wasn't happy with how much those two figures stood out against everything else in the scene. So thanks ever so much, everyone. It's been lovely to see you today. Surprising that it's the 19th of October already. Kind of scary. It is scary, isn't it? Although this year feels like it's been 3 years long in some respects, though, doesn't it? So maybe it'd be nice to break the back and get through this year, so we can focus on next year, and hopefully that might be a little bit more normal. But maybe we'll then have the plague of locusts and all of that kind of thing. Who knows what's going to happen? So thanks ever so much, everyone. Take care, and I'm sure I will see you all online at some point in the next week. Thanks ever so much. Bye bye, everyone. Bye bye.